This video is a digital workflow video to talk about Blue Diamond Implant System by MegaGen. My name is Danny Domeng. I'm a general dentist in Lafayette, Louisiana. I am a co-owner of General Dentist Practice. I own the Louisiana Dental Implant Lab, so everything that you're going to see in this video is from that lab, and mostly my cases. We're also the same lab that created the vortex screw for full arch, which most people are familiar with. And I started Digital Masters, so we teach guided surgery and how to 3D print guides and design guides with Dr. Corey Glenn, and also started the Small Mission Foundation, where I take dental students from LSU School of Dentistry, and we go to Mexico once a year to do dentistry on those in need. So I'm a big fan of MegaGen. I've been placing them for a number of years. And that's what this lecture is about. You can follow me on, I'm an implant diplomat, or actually Daniel Domeng DDS on Instagram, and the lab is LA Dental Implant Lab. Also have a YouTube channel that is Danny Domeng DDS, and Facebook, just if you want to follow Implants in Black and White for General Practitioners. It's a Facebook group of 6,000, 7,000 dentists that place and restore implants. Also co-chaptered chapter number 8 on Full Arch Guided Surgery book for 2 years in a row. Quintessence said it was the number one most selling book. If you're interested in the book, we actually have them on our website. You're welcome to buy them. Here's a little bit of history. In 2007, I graduated dental school from LSU School of Dentistry, and I moved to New York City, and I did a 3-year implantology fellowship where I placed and restored implants for 3 years and stopped practicing general dentistry like fillings. And the population was 8.5 million back then, and the average single person income was $100,000. And when I moved back to my hometown of Lafayette, Louisiana, if you Google Lafayette, Louisiana, you'll find this graveyard in the front round of our local church. The population is only 150,000. The average income for a combined household is around $60,000. The average home cost around $200,000. So patients, you're asking patients to buy a single implant for $5,000 or 2 implants for $10,000. That being 1/6 of their total income for the year, it's hard to get those patients to appreciate treatment. So what I found is getting really good lab work and keeping my costs down as much as possible has been a benefit for the patient population. In this video, we're going to talk about abutment selections. We'll talk about posterior, anterior bridges, our singles, bridges, screw retain versus cement retain, hopefully cover digital scanning enough, good lab communication, photography, scanning the ipsilateral side, any complications that I've seen, some CAD designing, MegaGen OEM parts, and then other things like occlusion, bites, excursions, things like that. So in 2018 is whenever I started milling my own work. So I would start designing at night, like around 9 or 10 o'clock at night, when my wife would go put our daughter down to bed, and I would go downstairs and I would design an exocad, a single tooth crown, bridges, all these things that you see here. And then when I get to work in the morning, I would put them all in the mill, and I'd mill out the crowns and abutments and bridges, zirconia crowns and things like that. And I learned a lot about workflows, and this is what the video is about. I actually created a video for MegaGen on the AnyRich system, because at the time it was new that they had like a 3.3, a 4-core, and a 4.8 core. This is actually a QR code at the bottom left to that video. Just so happens that I got a notification last week. It is the most viewed video on MegaGen Online School, which is pretty neat. This website is an international website of the top dentists around the world that place MegaGen implants, and it's the most viewed video in prosthodontics. So, what I want to start off by talking about is what we do at the lab, and our goal is to mimic exactly what the patient should have if they don't have, but to recreate the papilla, get the crowns to look right, and not put too much pressure on the ridge. Highly polished zirconia on the intaglio, following zero bone loss concepts, with nice glazed teeth. So whenever you put it in the patient's mouth, they should be really, really happy. For this particular woman, whenever I sat her out of the chair and gave her a mirror, I was very proud of the final result. I did not know she was colorblind, and she could not tell what color the tooth was. Regardless, whenever she smiles, everyone that sees her can't even tell it's an implant crown. I do a lot of guided implant placement, and I'm trying to get the implant in the ideal situation. trying to graft around the area to try to preserve bone so that whenever you restore these cases, you have a nice thick bed of keratinized tissue around the implant and nice thick keratinized gingiva on the buccal aspect, developing the soft tissue properly so you can get a zirconia crown or zirconia abutment to make it seamlessly look like the patient was born with it. Same thing to do not only just singles but also bridges for anterior placement. You can see this is this bridge was some zirconia abutments on tie bases, and there's all these concepts: hygienic ovate ponics, pressure on the tissue, subcrestal placement, highly polished zirconia, natural contours, bone growth over the implants, deep conical connection, immediate loading, tissue engineering, scalp profile, zero bone loss concepts, biologic driven concepts. These are all like keywords or spin words on what we're trying to create to recon the tissues and the areas to replace their teeth to make them look as natural as possible. So we're going to look at the Blue Diamond system. It's important to note, and it's really important for your office to know that there's really two main diameters. There's the NC, which is called narrow connection, and the RC. NC is only in the fixtures, the 3.3 and the 3.7. Once you hit 4.1, that's when you get into the bigger connections of the RC connection. So I would advise restoring and placing implants of the 3.3 really just in the lateral areas. 3.7 laterals, maybe a central if you have to. 4.1 would be my go-to to start out in the central, but ideally a 4.4. And the biggest thing is a connection diameter. So in a 3.3 fixture, you have a 2.8 millimeter connection. In a 3.7, it's a 2.8 millimeter connection. All right, so that's the connection difference between the NC and the RC. The RC is thicker the connection is bigger by a half of a millimeter. So it's also important to note that these core diameters are the thickness of the walls of the implant. So in a 4.1, you have a 3.5 millimeter core diameter implant. I'll explain that what a core diameter. Actually, let me just go to that slide real quick. So core diameter is the implant minus the threads, the thickness of the body of the implant. And you can see as this goes down to a 4.4, it's actually a 3.8. So the fins would go out at a radius of 0.3 millimeters. You can see thread depth here. That's a radius. So it's 0.3 for this is the diameter. So the radius would be 0.3. Same thing with a 4.4, thicker core diameters. And then once you hit the 5.3, the core diameters are the exact same. Why is that really important, and why am I pointing that out? I had some confusion on a case. So the MegaGen AnyRidge, so I'm trying to say, don't get this confused with MegaGen AnyRidge. So if you see a core diameter of 3.6, 3.8, don't think MegaGen AnyRidge and you want a 3.3 core abutment. This is Blue Diamond. It's a completely different system. You're only calling out Blue Diamond, NC, or RC. You're not worried about the core diameters for this system. And again, there's the NC, the 3.3 thread, so that this is the 3.3, but with the threads at 3.6. And then the 3.7, which really with the threads is a 4.0. Then again, the most commonly used implants are the 4.1, 4.4, and 4.8 in my practice. So we're restoring mostly with the RC abutment system as opposed to the NC. I prefer the thicker walled implants. So for these particular scan bodies, for these implants, there's going to be two scan bodies, one specific to the NC and one specific to the RC. Now the top of these look exactly the same, but you can see the bottom on the left, this is an NC scan body, and on the right is an RC. And you can see when looking at below this line, below the white part, how significantly different they are. It's important to note that the NC can fit into a RC implant, but the RC cannot fit into NC. So don't get these confused. They actually are laser etched on the scan bodies. So your staff should be able to see if it's a BD, which is Blue Diamond, NC, narrow connection, or the BD, Blue Diamond, RC, regular connection. MegaGen makes two heights and this is really important. They make two heights. They make a 9 millimeter height and they make a 13 millimeter height. They just recently came out on the 9 millimeter. I would highly recommend only buying one, either 9 millimeter or 13 millimeter. In my practice, I only buy the 13 millimeter scan bodies, and I only use the 13 millimeter height scan bodies. It's much less confusion for your staff to just carry one. It's also less confusion for the lab. So keep it easy. You don't need to stock both sizes. I would just keep the 13 millimeter. It even works in the posterior really easily, even in patients with tight bites. I don't never have an issue with using the 13 millimeter versus the 9 millimeter. So that's the scan bodies itself. Again, be careful with using the Blue Diamond NC in the RC implants because it does fit in there and it does thread in there. We'll get to that later on. Why is Blue Diamond system so unique? Unlike other systems, this is really good for dentists. This is terrible for labs. So the NC system has a tremendous amount of cuff heights, post heights, so reference numbers. And also the same thing for the RC system. So let's just say this is the NC. There's a short, a little bit taller, medium, tall, medium, tall, and an extra tall. So this is good. This does not affect dental offices, but it does affect dental practices. And it actually does improve the results that you'll get. And we'll come into this more later on. Most labs will carry like one or two of these abutments, and that does cause a problem because you're limited on the number of restorative options you have for those cases. I'll get into this more once we get into anterior custom zirconia abutments or screw retained crowns on tie bases. But just know that most labs will try to carry 1 to 2 to limit their stock, but this doesn't give you an advantage. What we do is we carry all these sizes and we keep 5 to 10 of each size depending on our most commonly used systems. It just increases the inventory for a lab and makes it, just increases the cost, but it is better for the restorative outcomes. So I'm only showing this to show you one thing. The original Straumann BL platform was a box, a square, and the MegaGen Blue Diamond new system that came out, it's an octagon, and the octagon fits within this system. So the Straumann, that's been such a great restorative platform, their NC and RC platforms, MegaGen basically modified that design and created this. So actually MegaGen parts and Blue Diamond NC RC fit into Straumann bone level implants, but Straumann parts, restorative parts, don't fit into any MegaGen implants. But so MegaGen, so restorative componentry for Straumann, you have 4 ways to place it, or really 3 ways to place it, 4 ways to place it. But for MegaGen, you have 8 different restorative sides. You have more timing connections for their platforms. That really won't affect you in private practice. Just know that you have more restorative outcomes to restore these implants, which is really nice. So one thing I do see a lot in scanning is scan bodies not being placed fully down. So this is a scan body. The original scan is the taller gray scan body, and the dentist or the dental assistant screwed it in, thought it was fully seated, took the scan and sent it to the lab, fabricated the abutment. When it came back, everything was off. And the reason why, and so we sent it to the doctor. He couldn't deliver the case, and we asked him to send us new scans, and the new scans were this gold scan body here. So you can kind of see the flats are to the flats, but it's much further down. He took a check x-ray and showed that the abutment was down fully. The scan body was down fully. So whenever we milled the abutment in the new final crown, it fit perfectly. So rule of thumb, every time you put a scan body inside a Blue Diamond implant, it's a lot different from MegaGen AnyRidge because it'll only thread once the abutment's fully engaged, but you still need to confirm that the scan body is fully seated inside the implant and not binding on bone at all, but it is actually fully seated. So take a confirmation x-ray, really important, just make sure you do that. The second thing I want to point out is scan body and abutment placement. So this is my case. I was doing a 3-unit bridge, and I placed a scan body in the posterior and a scan body in the anterior, and I scanned it, and I delivered the case, but I was having issues with the bridge fit. What I didn't realize was the design. They had the the abutment should have been in green and actually had it to the facial aspect. So I messed up. So what we do with custom abutments from here on out, on the facial aspect of all of our abutments, we place a little buckle groove. This increases the retention of the crown, but also signifies where the abutment should go. And the groove is always mid-buckle of the abutment, and this helps with orientation. So that'll help prevent any issues when you're trying to deliver abutment and you don't know which side is which. So this is kind of like a bonehead move on my part. I just didn't place the abutment right, or maybe I was just in a rush that day. Another common issue I'm seeing is whenever you scan previous abutments, this is a prefab abutment, and we want to make a crown for it. You can see the soft tissue is over the margin of the abutment. And since you can't see it, the lab's not able to design an abutment. So either packing cord or laser the tissue or cutting the tissue back so the lab has full view of the abutment. So that they can make a crown on this tooth. And then you obviously scan the scan body. In this exact same particular case, the scan body would not fully seat because it was impinging on bone. That is really common. I took this x-ray, realized it wasn't fully seated. So what I've done with a lot of my scan bodies, and this is a desk scan body on a different type of case, but I don't like binding of the scan bodies, so I will prep with a carbide burr and remove some material, because a lot of times whenever I'm scanning abutments, I'm deep, and these scan bodies won't go that deep unless you prep them back. So I'll take the AnyRidge scan body or the MegaGen Blue Diamond NCRC, and I'll prep it back a little bit and just highly polish it and clean it up. But you get the idea. Just kind of make it so that whenever I put these scan bodies deep below the bone, I'm not having issues with the abutments bottoming out and not seating all the way like it did in this one particular case, right? So eliminate that issue, trim up your scan bodies. The part you don't want to touch is this top part. This is the most important part. The last 4 millimeters will affect your case, but you can prep it down here and obviously be careful of the componentry that goes inside the implant. So the next thing is these, what you might be familiar with are MegaGen AnyRidge, the 4-core, 4.8 core, screw retain crowns in the posterior, and then 4-core abutment. You don't have to worry about any of this for MegaGen Blue Diamond system. This is all AnyRidge. You're not calling out core diameters like you used to. The most important part for these, determining whether you want a screw retain crown in the posterior or you want a titanium abutment with a crown separate with a screw access hole. That's the call outs that you really need to have for this. So scanning wise, my preference, because it's not costing anything, and now with the new scanners are so fast, it's unbelievable. We take even with a single tooth, we take a full arch scan. Reason why is I like that the Louisiana Dental Implant Lab will copy this tooth, mirror it, use it on this side to actually fabricate the next tooth. And if it doesn't fit, if this space is a little bit bigger, they'll make modifications to make it fit. So scan the lower arch, scan the upper arch, scan the bite, scan the left bite and the right bite, then expose the implant and scan it. So you're going to have upper arch scan, lower arch scan with the soft tissue, lower arch scan with the scan body, right side bite, left side bite. So you should have 5 total scans. I'm really only in the room to expose the implant and torque in or screw in the scan body, take an x-ray to confirm that it's fully seated, and I usually walk out the room, and the staff mostly does the rest. What you're looking for on the scan body is that it's fully seated. So you need to see no open gaps right here at the margin. This is a RC abutment. And you really want to look at the base. This screw should not be bottoming out. It should be like a 0.5 millimeter or a millimeter just about to bottom out, but not completely. That's when you know that the scan body is fully seated. Same thing with the custom abutment. It's going to have the same length of that screw at depth. So this particular case, this is a Blue Diamond RC, and we chose to go with a custom titanium abutment on with a final crown. All right, and this is a referral patient, so this patient is not going to get a screw access hole. You can see a screw access hole on this one, but for this particular crown, we're going to just go with a custom abutment. Again, so you'll see the abutment margins, and whenever you get a web view from the lab, you kind of look at the soft tissue. So the abutment margins should be 0.5 millimeters below the facial aspect. It should be equal gingiva to the tissues on the proximal, and it should be slightly supragingival. Now, you'll get into some situations where the gingiva is excessive and the gingiva will be up really, really high, and then you won't get enough ferrule of the abutment, so sometimes we'll drop the margins below that. All right, so that's a single tooth posterior titanium abutment on a premolar. Let's look at a molar, pretty much the same situation. But again, look at the depth of the bone over the implant platform. And this is after healing after 3 months. So to restore this, I'm going to restore it with another posterior titanium abutment on a crown. And I'm going to pull it up in a second. But this is the scan body scan, again, confirming that it's fully seated. You can see the scan body was trimmed up a little bit. You can also see the trumpet shape, I like to call it, of the custom abutment. So really emerging really well from the implant platform and not going out too bulbous and putting pressure on the adjacent bone. And if we want to look at this a little bit further, this is going to be what web view you would get from the lab, and you can make any changes if you'd like to. Again, the buccal notch to confirm where it is. And then this is your final crown with a screw access hole, because this would be a final zirconia crown. I do more zirconia crowns with screw access holes than I do screw retain crowns on a tie base. Just there's more options, less limits for that. I like to cement in the patient's mouth. A lot of dentists really like the lab to cement. I prefer cement on my end. It's really just easier if you have to make any minor corrections to torquing the abutment, then make your corrections on the crown before you cement. So hope that was helpful. This is the single tooth on a posterior. So let's look at screw retain crown on a posterior. So this is a bicuspid, and you can see that the implant is a little bit angled, right? And it doesn't look like it's in line from the crown view, but if you look at the x-ray, you can see how tight it is against those adjacent canine and bicuspid. So here's a scan body scan. This is the x-ray after, and you can see it's a screw retain crown on a tie base. All right, so the web view is going to pull up here in a second, and this is what it looks like. This is the confirmation you would give to the lab, like in where the screw access hole comes out. We'll talk about a little bit more about, so I'll just bring it up right now. But this titanium tie base is really important because remember all those options that you had. But the most important thing to me is after the bone is out. So I prefer the titanium base to transverse through the bone. And once you get into the soft tissues, I want the highly polished zirconia intaglio to be able to get a hemidesmal attachment and recreate the biological seal around these implants. So again, titanium goes through bone, zirconia with the soft tissue. This is a posterior screw-retain crown, and let's look at multiple bridges, because bridges are what we get a lot of from dental offices, and a lot of people want screw-retain crowns or screw-retain bridges, and it's not always the case that we can actually deliver it. Let me show you why. Let's do the lower case. So what you're looking at here is the emergence of this implant and emergence of this implant, and through this bridge, right? So turn that off. So what was helpful for this particular case was making two custom abutments, because you can see that they're not angulated correctly. They're not angulated perfect. So making a screw retain crown on tie base is going to be very difficult for this case to deliver passively. My preference is titanium abutments because they're stronger. Torque in titanium abutments and deliver the final zirconia bridge, and again with screw access holes through the bridge, right? Same thing for this other area. Now for this one, you have a little bit better emergence, but it's still not great. It's still not accurate. So again, creating a screw retain crown, you would have to have one of these abutments hexed and one of them non-hexed. And again, it's just my preference that I torque in the abutments and deliver the bridge. It's really whatever you want to do. So another bridge case, again, custom abutments, screw retained crown on the bridge. I like to torque in these abutments. Other cases where we have the implants above. So this is the implant platform here, limited bone issues. You're going to get some food into this area. Obviously, just keep it real clean with a water pick. If you want to close up the space, I've also seen people wanting to splint crowns together. There's all these conceptions about when you want to splint, when you want to split. I'd say in a female that's 90 pounds and she doesn't clench or grind and she's got immaculate teeth and she takes good care of it, you really don't need to split those crowns. But let's say in a big, burly 300 something pound man that clenches and grinds and just drives his teeth down to nothing, splitting the crowns is sometimes not a bad idea, right? It'll help support each other. So I'm okay with that in that situation. But I don't love splitting crowns all that often because patients don't like to floss underneath bridges or floss underneath splinted crowns. Again, just another case of a single tooth screw retained crown on a custom abutment. You could also do this with a titanium tie base. But when it is difficult for screw retained crowns on tie bases because they don't always work. And here's why. Here's the path of draw. So I think I can pull this up real quick, but this is the screw retained. This is the path of draw of this. Let's come back to that. This is the path of draw of this abutment, and this is the path of draw of this abutment. So it's going to be really hard to deliver these screw retained crowns in and not hit one another. So we created custom abutments with individual crowns for this case instead. And again, you can see the screw access holes as it is. Anterior cases. Let's look at that. Let's look at titanium abutments or zirconia abutments in the anterior. I've seen cases where I want a screw retained crown on a tie base, and I have like the screw access hole is coming right out the facial aspect. And what I would recommend on those particular cases for your cases is you can get up to 8 degrees of angulated screw channel if you still want to screw retain that case. And that's what I do for my cases. So let's look at this. This is the patient's crown. So we change the angulation 8 degrees. So you can see it really should come out like that, and it's coming out like this, but you can still get the driver without chipping the zirconia margin at the incisal edge position. So 10 would be the max I'd be able to do it. So again, this channel was changed because I didn't want to nick the incisal edge. We changed it 8 degrees so we could still make it a screw retained crown. We chose to go, so there was going to be 2 options. I'll show you this. There's 2 options for this particular case for the titanium tie base. One that's a lot taller and one that's a little bit shorter. Now, I like to use the taller ones when possible. Like I said earlier, I want the titanium to transverse through the bone and then have the zirconia sitting in soft tissues. So, but the issue with this particular case was if you use the taller one, she has a really tight bite, and the tie base would actually hit her lower teeth. It would actually occlude with lower teeth. So in this particular case, we could not use her abutment like we wanted to, or the taller abutment. So we used a shorter abutment, and actually it came out quite nice for her case. But again, you can see that here in this web view, how it would occlude with the lower arch. You can see that the crown perforating through the mandibular anterior teeth, which would cause an interaction, and you would not be able to use this titanium tie base. So we went with the shorter tie base. This is I don't always use zirconia abutments in the anterior for strength reasons. Sometimes I use titanium abutments. It really just kind of depends. If I'm restoring with a zirconia crown, I don't mind using a titanium tie base, especially if I have tight bites, especially if it's a man that's a grinder, or if the adjacent tooth that's going to be crowned has root canal and I'm blocking out on that crown as well. I don't mind doing a custom titanium abutment in the anterior for patients. And you can see the cosmetic result of a titanium abutment. And these are just PMMA provisionals on her. These are not her final restorations, but it's even blocking out the titanium in that case. So here's her design file. You can see it just gave us a little bit more angulation changes that we could make in the custom abutment, as opposed to going with a zirconia crown. You do have some limitations with a zirconia abutment, instead of using a titanium abutment, you have a little bit more leeway. As far as anterior bridges are concerned, I'm kind of either way. I can do zirconia abutments, and I'm okay with titanium abutments. Titanium abutments being a little bit stronger in the anterior. If it's a cosmetic case, and they're really particular about it, then sometimes I will use zirconia abutments in the anterior. That's fine. And this is this particular case of zirconia abutments in the anterior for this upper bridge. And the final bridge is going to be a zirconia bridge on those two implants in 7 and 10. This is the web view for this patient's case. You can see the zirconia abutments, and it's be really hard. You can see the angulation of the implants. It's gonna be really hard to make a screw retain bridge on this, just due to the angulation. Both of these titanium tie bases would potentially have to be non-hexed or non-engaging for this to seat passively. So zirconia abutments in the anterior for a bridge, I'm super cool with. Also, I'm more than fine with the titanium abutments on bridges in the lower anterior. Again, especially if you have short abutments, you're trying to get as much strength as you can. You can even screw retain one of these on a tie base, use a cemented abutment for the other one, and then that's how you'd be able to retain the bridge. Again, a little bit tight of a bite for this particular patient. I just delivered this today, and you can see the abutments in the delivery. So we'll move right along. This is the zirconia abutment because this particular doctor wanted to use Emax. That's really the only time I would specifically say you would have to use a zirconia abutment is whenever you're restoring with an Emax crown. Zirconia crowns nowadays can block out most of anything. That's pretty much all you really need to know about scanning anterior abutments, posterior abutments, screw retain bridges, screw retain crowns, and let's get into a little bit more advanced, which is the OXA system. This is the AXA. So there's a difference between the gold right here, which is the traditional multi-unit abutment, and the silver here, which is the new OXA abutment. So it's a little bit taller profile. And they say that it increases strength. Now, the OXA abutment is specific for the Blue Diamond system, and it's called the AXA abutment. It's a prefabricated abutment that you can use as a screw retain for bridges. So they have a 0 degree, they have a 12 degree, they have a 20 degree, and they have a 30 degree. So much different from a multi-unit abutment, not even completely the same. But similar concepts, just not the same system. So you can kind of see that this is what a OXA straight and this is what the OXA angled looks like, right? So then there's, again, 0. I think it was, I can't remember the angulation changes, 12, 20, and 30. So 12, 20, 30. These have been really helpful for me, but I'll tell you that the trick to be able to use these. I really only use them whenever I can't get the restorative success that I want. So this particular case was very difficult. In fact, her brother-in-law is a dentist, and we placed implants in 6, 7, and 10. This is going to be a single tooth crown with a 4-unit bridge, and you can see this is the scan bodies for this particular case. So not too bad. I don't think this is too far buckle at all. For this particular case, but whenever you're in zirconia abutments, like I said earlier, you do have some limitations in zirconia. So whenever the design was made, as far as we could get this bridge abutment to go back, it still was just coming out too far facially. Why? Watch, I'll show you. This is number 7. You're limited by this titanium tie base because you have to have zirconia to go on top of it, and it bottoms out here. This is where the zirconia would bottom out. And there's less play, there's less give. So the thought was, why don't we switch immediately and go to a titanium tie base for this case, so you can kind of see the before and after. So the results of the bridge were hideous, right? You got this super tall crown. It's not harmonious. So we went to a titanium abutment, and you can see the angulation you get with a titanium abutment is much greater than a zirconia. However, the aesthetics were still not nailed. I didn't love the aesthetics at all. So I got the patient back in, and what we did is we scanned her with a OXA abutment. You can see this was the original scan. This is the OXA scan. So this is a 12 degree, and I think it's a 4 millimeter cuff height. I torqued it out and I scanned it. If you're using this, the best way to do it is get the patient back in, torque the OXA abutment out, and then take a new scan and send it back to the lab. That's when I found to get my best results. Now, the lab can actually tell you what OXA abutment to order because you're not going to have those in stock. The lab may or may not particularly have that one, but MegaGen get this shipped over to you pretty quickly. And but ask the lab what OXA abutment you could use. You would torque that out. This would be a prefabricated abutment, so the bridge would be screwed into this OXA abutment. And this was the final design of this bridge. So we were able to fix the angulation issues that we were having with this case just using the OXA abutment 12 degrees. And you can see the final result, much more harmonious with the patient's soft tissues. And you can see, thankfully, we just used a zirconia abutment on this. We can even actually, instead of using a zirconia abutment, we could even just screw retain this directly to the bridge. However, her brother-in-law, like I said, is doing the final results. So he wanted to restore her case. And so I'm going to torque in the abutments, put in a provisional bridge, and she's going to go see him for the finals. So again, using OXA is a great system. I really like it. It's not for the faint of heart. It does take a little bit more effort and thought that goes into it. Now, I'm gonna talk a little bit about NC and RC where you can get in trouble. This is the NC screw, and this is the RC screw. Pretty wild. They're almost identical screws, with the biggest exception is the threads of the RC are wider than the NC threads, but they have the exact same pitch. So again, this NC can thread into a RC abutment or RC implant, right? But the RC screw cannot engage into the NC. You need to know that the RCs, even though all of the healing abutments are purple for this system, the screws are gray. I wish MegaGen would have done a little bit better with the colorization of the prosthetic parts, because if their RC componentry is gray, they should keep everything gray, or if it's purple for the healing abutments, they should keep everything purple. But that being said, just know that could cause some confusion. So gold is NC, RC is silver. So this is my case when I was first doing scan bodies and abutments. I didn't particularly care for and notice what scan bodies I was using. So again, like I told you at the beginning of the lecture, the NC and the RC scan body look exactly the same up top. The difference is the connection. So when this is a uncovery, and I put the scan bodies in, and it looked fully seated. But what I didn't notice is there's no gap at the bottom right here. But it did fully seat, and it looked good on the x-ray. So when I went to deliver the custom abutments, I noticed there was like a little tiny gap, and there was like a little tiny gap on the scan body scan. So I was like, man, what did I do, or what happened? And I went to torque the abutments out, and then all of a sudden I felt some slack in the line, which my heart dropped, and I realized I torqued out the screw and fractured the screw inside the implant, and I was dead. There's nothing I can do. I tried to remove the screw, but I torqued it out too far, and it was not coming out. I wound up realizing that it was my mistake, that I scanned with an NC scan body, and I ordered an NC abutment because I was looking at the core size of the implant and not actually the platform. I didn't order like an NC and RC. I ordered the core size, which was wrong. So what I did was I had them redesign this. I had to get the patient back in, scan this for an RC, and restore this with a custom abutment and a final crown. I wound up having to back this implant out. I use this new implant tapping remover tool instead of using a trephine burr. back the implant right out, put a new implant in the same exact day. So I went from a 4.1 to a 4.4. After it healed for a while, I wound up going with a new scan body for the RC. Look, little gap at the bottom. That knows I'm using the right system. And then here is the RC that's not quite torqued out. I took this X-ray. I could see a little platform, little gap. Then I retorqued it. Now you can see it's fully sealed up. And then I placed the final crown, and thankfully we were able to save the case. So to kind of close everything up, this is what a typical lab script would look like from my office. So obviously the patient's name, when we wrote the order form, because sometimes when you ship these to the lab, it might take like longer than 2 days to get to us, and we'll realize that when you took the scans, we need to rush this case a little bit because it got hung up in the mail. We like to know if it's a female or male, and then types of restoration, bridges or crown. Please call out the tooth numbers and what material. You want zirconia, PMMA. If you have any mistakes, just cross it out. It's not a big deal. We're not that fancy. Then call out what type of abutments you want: titanium abutments, zirconia abutments, or you want a tie base, so screw retain only option. If you want cement retain, mark it. If you want screw retain, so if you want a titanium custom abutment, you want a PMA crown, but you want it cement retain or screw retain, so we'll add a screw access hole. Just call out what you want. The other helpful thing that we do is we take the sticker from the chart and copy it, and we always hold extra stickers, so we just put the sticker on the lab script. This is really beneficial for the lab, and it's really beneficial for your staff. The reason why is there's all the implant information in this for the lab. So if there is a miswrite on here, or if they don't give us all the information, we can get the information from here. You're not calling out what abutment sizes you want, like a 3.3 core, 4 core, 4.8 core. You're really just calling out NC and RC, but we would know that from this sticker, right? So in the instructions, you can just write everything up here: PMA bridge, abutment on 12, will be extracting 11 in the future, blah, 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 whatever you want. To order these, you can scan them, email them to us. You can also go to our website, and it shows you how to submit a case. You can click on this. It'll go over our fee schedule. You can pay your bill online. This is how to submit a case. You can print out a lab script, so we can send you a massive amount of lab pads. You can submit them through the portal. You can also fill out a prescription online, and it'll load to a Dropbox. So really easy. Scanning, Medit, iTero, 3Shape, Cerac, AS Connect, Shining. There's every single DS Core. There's every single option for whatever scanner system that you have. We accept everything on the market. We even have this custom portal section, which people really love. Instead of calling our lab, you can log in to your specific account and find out cases in progress, find out where they're at, how many cases you have in production. You can also submit a case through here. You can go to approvals, so you can look at. I just went into cases and view cases. These are all the cases that are in production, and you can find out the estimated ship time and where they're at in fabricating. This has a plethora of information, lots of notes that the lab takes, and you can actually read the lab notations on here. So in this education videos form right here, if you scroll down, you'll see how to submit a case, how to fully fill out your RX online, how to prevent common scan errors. These are just some educational videos that are helpful for your staff. Please have them watch these videos that we created. It really helps eliminate minor issues that cost you money and time and sometimes frustration. But we're constantly updating the website. If you have anything, and you want to know about us, please reach out and ask. This is our team. This is me. I started it, and then our HR person, marketing person, Vortex coordinator, Vortex engineer. Then we have our design team, our milling team, and our seed and stain team. So the lab's grown over the past couple of years just because of the success we've had with MegaGen OEM parts. Because we are one of MegaGen's certified milling centers, and we have been since inception. We use the best machines on the market. Many of our our lab techs are actually mechanical engineers, so we're constantly testing these parts to make sure that there's no fracture issues or prosthetic failures or common silly mistakes that could potentially happen. And again, our website has IFUs, instruction for use and policies as far as warranty is concerned as well. So hope this video was helpful. The lab has established relationships with doctors so they can get, transform people's lives, and people that have had terrible teeth their whole entire life, and transform them with full arches, single tooth, posterior bridges, whatever. Just some examples to show just before and afters of patients that have struggled with their teeth for such a long period of time, and just the smile makeovers. This lady had an upper denture, and this is her result. This guy had a lower denture with all failing maxillary teeth. This is before and after results. Guy had advanced periodontal disease. This is first set of provisionals. He's never loved his teeth, and now he loves a smile. This particular guy that struggled for a long period of time. This lady who actually drove, I think, 13 hours to come to see us. These are actually milled PMA provisionals. She had an upper FP1 after we extracted the last 4 teeth in her mouth and gave her some implanted teeth. This is her before and after result. And just tremendously happy with the results we've gotten over time. And thank you. Reach out if you need anything. Hopefully this video was helpful so you can help restore implants. Social media, reach out if you need anything at Danny Delman DDS or LA Don't Plant Lab. Email us, and hopefully we can help you in the next case. Thank you.